Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Anthony Moreno. Welcome to Your Legislators. Joining us to talk about New Mexico's legislative session and issues facing the state is District 39 Republican State Representative Luis Terrazas. Representative Terrazas, thank you so much for joining us.
How are you, Anthony? Gusto verte otra vez. Nice to see you again.
Exactly.
We've done this 3 years in a row.
I'm very excited to talk with you. Obviously, we have a lot of folks in your district and across our region that are interested in what you have to say about the legislative session in New Mexico. I want to get your thoughts on the budget. Obviously, an important issue for lawmakers to address every session. What are the main concerns you have within your district that you think lawmakers in Santa Fe can make a difference with this budget?
One of the things that I just was contacted about was the budgeting for schools and transportation. And it looks like that was resolved. They thought they were going to get underfunded with obviously all the new money that came in. We're going to be in decent shape. We're going to be able to help school districts and other projects around our district, such as Highway 180. Although that passed the last time, it's still a real big issue in Grant County. We've wanted a 4-lane highway for many, many years. And so it's becoming now it's going to become reality. And so we have a lot of happy Grant Countyans and ready to see that happen. It's only going to be a portion of what really we need to do, but at least it's a start.
Yeah, such a big concern for a lot of folks in the area who also love to travel to Silver City, on a regular basis as well. Another big issue being talked about in the legislative session is public safety. I'd like to get your thoughts on legislation that you think needs to be implemented to address public safety issues in your district and across the state.
You bet. So we have several things going on. One in particular is return to work. And I know that you hear that. And there's our municipalities, our people around our area absolutely want it and need it. We heard it the other night in committee, and it's unfortunately a big hot button issue between different entities deciding on what's the best route to take that in and what direction. But at the end of the day, when you have shortages of police officers, law enforcement, when you have shortages in other departments, whether it's the fire department, social workers, and other things around the state, it is a big issue. Public safety, going back to public safety, qualified immunity is an issue. This revolving door of allowing people that are continuously in and out and aren't being held in bond for those whatever issues is a big deal in not just Grant County and my district, but throughout the state. I mean, I'm watching things in Las Cruces in your area. I watched some stuff come up where it's an issue, and the funny thing is, it's not just in Grant County. I walked into a Dillard's the other day, and the gentleman there was expressing how people are just literally walking in. I went to buy a coat. I needed a new coat, and I said, do you have any coats? And he says, we had one, they stole 3. So they had to order me one. And he says they're walking in 3 to 5 times a day, just picking up merchandise and walking out. And this is a big problem throughout the state.
One of the issues in the area you represent has been just being able to fill positions with public safety officers and law enforcement in the region. Can you give us an idea of just how big of an issue that is?
It's a huge issue, Anthony. The sheriff's office, I believe the last that I heard, had 12 vacancies. That's huge in a small department in comparison to other departments. That may not seem like a lot, but in our area for Grant County, that's a big deal. Some of the other municipalities also have had a lot of problems in filling in these positions. And so part of my reason of pushing return to work is it allows people that, and let me explain something. Some people think this is a double dipping issue. I can tell you that we are trying to create legislation that brings back already retired individuals that have interest in coming back. We're not trying to build a mechanism to have people retire for an incentive to quit, right, retire and come back. We want to get people that are already retired to come back to work for several reasons. One for me is the mentorship that they give the younger employers or employees, excuse me. Another thing, the experience that they have that they can share, right? The other thing is it gives that person that is retired, which is usually one of the big reasons that they want to come back to work, is to pay for health care. They can't afford to just be retired and pay for health care. So it allows them to help that retired individual. The other thing is the argument that you keep hearing is, well, if by doing this, we're not allowing others to come to work. Well, the reality is, if you just look around in your communities and you see all the posted signs of help wanted, they're not coming to work, Anthony. So we are trying to fill in those positions to the best of our ability. The last thing that I'm going to say is, if we really, really care about those individuals who are working, like I said the other day in committee, was those in the detention center. My county itself is a very, very pro return to work for one reason. We're in a detention center. The less employees you have in a detention center, the more dangerous it is to keep control. If you want to walk into a place that's half-staffed, that's scary, right, to some individuals. Now, if you're missing one or two positions and you're filling them, well, it's 90%, 95% filled. You've got a good presence there. You feel comfortable walking into that. You walk into a job that it has only half the positions filled, and you're forced to work overtime, and you're forced to maybe not take the days off that you would normally get. All this is a combination that just you're basically making it worse if we don't find other ways, innovative ways to get them to come back to work. Private industry has been doing this for years. They recognize that these individuals that have all this wealth of experience that are deciding it's time for me to go and take some time off. And maybe they do this for a year or two and say, you know what, I'm bored. I've already golfed. I've done all the things I wanted to. I don't want to watch TV all day. I want to get back to work. And this gives them a way that the private industry has invited them back and see that wealth of knowledge can be shared to their younger employees.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about Encore Careers. That's also been very popular over the last decade and even longer, and bringing that experience back into the workplace. But just sheer numbers, how big of an impact is this in your county? I know that there was community organizations working to fill voids within some of the districts and the mining districts there. So can you kind of give us an understanding about what steps you think lawmakers are going to take to address this? Because you're not just dealing with the shortage of law enforcement, especially at the leadership level, but you're also dealing with issues of retaining professionals in law enforcement, because they may start there, get some experience within a year, and then they're off to another agency that's going to pay higher salaries and perhaps better benefits. So what are some things lawmakers are trying to address with this?
Well, I think what you're addressing is what happened with the state police raises that were given. That is one of those things where we're helping one agency and hurting another. And so that's a perfect example of what happens when we're out of balance and things aren't in order. Yes, we needed more state police officers. My understanding is a tremendous amount of state police officers have left. And so by raising their salaries, they attracted others, but then they took them away from the municipalities and the counties. So now they're struggling where they were already struggling. Now they're even struggling more to not only retain officers, but to attract officers with that pay difference.
Yeah,
I want to think of things. I want to tell you something. Let's think of it as a police officer. If you're short-staffed and you get yourself in a situation that is troublesome, and you don't have backup because you don't have the staffing, are you going to pull someone over in that situation? Are you going to find yourself in that situation? Are you going to pass that up? There's a lot of things that go along with this. So if that doesn't make you feel safe, then you may not want to be in that altogether in that situation. So you're not going to join a department that's so understaffed that you might find yourself in a vulnerable situation. So it's not just pay because they've underfunded it so much, or you're overworked. Let's just say you're overworked, and any of us get overworked to a point that we don't think as crisp and clear as we need to when we work a normal shift. And so, I mean, we think about this, if you're a pilot and you're overworked, that's a dangerous situation. What if you're a police officer and you find yourself working more than you should, or understaffed without the backup that you need? That is just part, because it's not just wages, it's a lot of other things that are coming along. Maybe it's management. Maybe management is an issue. I mean, there are a lot of things. Maybe it's this is where qualified immunity is an issue. And so you've got a bunch of things that are causing this one issue. It's not just one.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be considered there. And when you're talking about competition within some of these municipalities, I mean, you mentioned state police. I mean, there's also other agencies in larger cities. There's also federal agencies as well that we should consider. So I also want to move on to another issue. You know, we've been talking about how big of an issue law enforcement is in filling those voids in rural communities, but just rural communities in general. A big portion of your district is rural. So I'd like to hear from you. You know, what are some things that you think are the most pressing issues being talked about within this legislative session that you think your constituents may get some results from?
I think in our area, Anthony, one of the huge issues was a black fire. We saw fires throughout the state, but in our district alone, all the flooding that it caused, a lot of our farmers and some of our ranchers were impacted tremendously. Not only that, but they were people that live in rural areas around the rivers that run through there, the Gila and the Mimbres, that didn't have access to their homes, couldn't leave their homes. Maybe it's to a doctor's appointment. Maybe it was that they needed groceries. Maybe it's because they needed emergency services to go to them. So, and then you have your agricultural people who couldn't get water to their crops. And you know what a lot of people don't realize and may not realize is that, and I'm always learning. Let me tell you, you're as a legislator, boy, you learn a lot about your constituents when you're in this position. But I can tell you, you know, when a farmer, I didn't realize that they water their crops in the winter so that they can feed their animals, so that they don't have to pay for feed, and so there's no water. Some of them have been without water for some time, and because of the way things are working, right? As far as, let's just say, capital outlay, they're not going to see this money come down till July, and that's just to get the funding. Then you still have to get the project in order and taken care of. Although we are trying through different legislation to get money to them in an emergency order, at this moment in time, it hasn't happened. It hasn't gotten down to the farmers and ranchers and those people that need it. And so, but here's the other problem that we're not seeing. Some of these areas that were burned, that the burn scar was not reseeded. And so you're going to have, for the next 3 to 5 years, flooding is going to continue going through those areas. And so just as the funding is getting in there, think of the timing. If you're a farmer, you don't start farming in July. You start farming earlier, right? As you're getting things in order. So you need water to your place. and then what happens in July? It's when we have our monsoons. So all the infrastructure they just fixed is going to get could be, and most likely will be wiped out again. And so you can see them chasing their tail, trying to get water for their crops, and this could break farmers and agricultural people that depend on the infrastructure and funding to maintain that. So we've got a challenge in the next 3 to 5 years, and I addressed this in town halls and other meetings, that I foresee this being a real big problem.
It is a big problem.
Hasn't come through.
Yeah,
Yes,
what
sir.
do you think the holdup is then? You mentioned federal funding. What seems to be the holdup with that in your opinion?
My understanding, Anthony, is that on the federal funding, they didn't meet the thresholds that were there. I don't know all the reasons of why that didn't happen. I think there is some agencies that are trying to help. I would have liked to have seen, because our commission had stated that they were going to have some like a situation where they can all come, almost like a job fair type situation where farmers could come. That's what was promised by our county, that they would come in and give them guidance in filling applications and so forth, to test different agencies of where they could get funding. I from the constituents, I'm hearing that they haven't gotten that, and so part of that could be the thresholds weren't met and other things. So the state legislature through some bills, and I can't spit out the numbers right now, but I'd have to look at my sheet. We are trying to get money for the Black Fire, just like other areas in New Mexico are trying to find funding for their situations all around the state. One of the other things is just trying to get funding through another form where we can get some of these water projects and stuff handled. So we've got a lot of challenges. I mean, it's very, very troublesome for me to see where we're at, and seeing that we're going to put a Band-Aid on something. Although we're trying now, it's this infrastructure pre my tenure should have been addressed, where we'd have more solid structure and infrastructure, where we wouldn't find ourselves in this situation today.
Well, the state is in the situation where they have a flush of money coming in with projected revenue. So, and I know there's a lot of competition for that, but just within the stage, what you can control and make an impact in. I mean, the Black Fire was the second largest fire in recorded history in New Mexico. So,
yes, sir.
Do you think lawmakers and state agencies are really moving fast enough with helping out folks in the area who may have been impacted by this?
I think they're trying everything they can now. It's just one of these things that infrastructure. It's like if you have a home and you don't replace the roof, and pretty soon you're not painting, and the gutters are falling off, and the doors are kind of off the hinges. They're not closing just right, and you continue going down this road, and then all of a sudden you got to fix it because you find yourself in a situation where you had a heavy rain. Now you got all these leaks and all these problems, and to resolve that, now it's a massive influx of money rather than keeping up with it. Hey, you know what? The gutter's falling off. We need attention to it then, and other things as you keep up with maintenance. I think we've fallen behind on maintenance throughout the state. You see it on highways. You see it water infrastructure throughout the state. There are a lot of things, and whether we're behind on paying some of our paying payroll or our payroll to individuals, people that are getting paid. I don't care in what agencies, whether you're whether you're looking at a police officer, a fireman, or a social worker or a nurse. All these state agencies that haven't been paying properly, we're behind now, and so to catch up is very difficult. Now we haven't. These are part of the reasons that we're not retaining workers. VSOs, for instance, veteran services officers, it's a revolving door in our area. Why? They don't get paid enough. They don't get paid enough, and they don't get mileage. They cover a huge area. You're in rural New Mexico, so you're driving 100 miles round trip, and so they don't have. They're having to do this on their own dime, on low wages, and so they're not staying. And so we wonder why we're not getting these. We're having all these problems. It's a multitude of things.
Yeah, many challenges. Obviously, New Mexico, a large state, a lot of rural areas, a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of issues that need to be addressed. And that's why we're talking with you. You talked about public safety pretty in depth. I'd like to hear your thoughts on firearm legislation being discussed in the legislature. Is there something that you feel you can support? Any particular legislation?
Look, I'm going to tell you, we're in New Mexico. New Mexico, whether it doesn't matter what's happening, this is a pro Second Amendment state, and they are the vast majority of my district is pro Second Amendment. I think there's some legislation that, although it means well, is not going to address the problem. I can tell you, keeping a firearm in a safe place that doesn't define what a safe place is not good legislation. What is safe to you may not be safe to me, and vice versa. And so they've seen that it's been challenged in the Supreme Court, and it's not upholding. And so they're trying to redefine this and try to find a way to make a safe place sound good. But you put a firearm in let's say up on the top of your closet because you only have children that are under age 5, but their cousins come over and start snooping around and maybe find this weapon, and then the parents then are charged if somebody gets hurt. That's loose legislation, and I think it'll be challenged. I think also, I will also tell you, Anthony, we're trying to make Albuquerque's problems our rural New Mexico's problems. The lack of officers in Albuquerque, the lack of good, strong legislation, the undermining of law enforcement through some of the things that we've talked about earlier are all the causes of why we're seeing what we're seeing today. And so you have less police officers on the streets, you're going to have more crime, you're going to have more speeding, you're going to have more accidents. It's just, they go hand in hand.
Yeah,
but I can tell you,
there's a lot of challenges. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time with you, but I'd like to hear go back to the question. I mean, is there any legislation that you see being presented that you think you can support?
That I have read right now, I can tell you this, I will stand for the Constitution. I haven't seen anything that respects the Constitution that I can support at this time. Okay, look, Anthony, I'm a funeral director. And I can tell you, if we want to talk about saving lives, I can assure you that I have not seen. I talked to my fellow funeral directors in the Southwest, and including Albuquerque, and I asked, listen, are people shooting themselves? Have you had any cases where regular citizens are shooting each other with AR-15s, assault rifles? He said, all the ones, every single place that I called, they said, I've had a few, and every single one of them was because it was law enforcement that they were shot by, not citizen to citizen. It's all law enforcement, including in my area. So people aren't shooting each other with those type of firearms. It's just not happening. And I know firsthand because I work in that industry that sees that. The people that are dying in our area are dying from fentanyl. They're dying. I'm making removals, and we're seeing deaths 3 at a time of immigrants coming across the border that are dying of dehydration, and we're picking them up 3 at a time. And this is just my company. So I know the other companies are doing the same. You don't hear that in the news, and it's sad. But those are the deaths that we're actually seeing are fentanyl, and those immigrants crossing the border that are dying of dehydration. We're seeing car accidents on the interstate because of lack of enforcement. And I'm not saying why that's not happening. I'm just letting you know that we had a lot of car accidents in the last 18 months, more than I have remembered in recent years than other times.
So, I mean, I only have a minute left with you, but let's just
Yes, sir.
hone in on that one thing that you talked about, road safety. I mean, you mentioned infrastructure being a big issue, but I mean, what other things you think folks can do in Santa Fe during this legislative session to help reduce those numbers?
Support law enforcement, sir. Support law enforcement. Pass the return to work bills. You know, and you have this constant fight between unions and what counties want and what the municipalities want. I can tell you that if I was a person in a detention center and I was understaffed and overworked, and I'm begging for help, if I'm a police officer that doesn't have backup and I'm begging for help, we need to do everything we can to not just a return to work bill isn't going to solve it all by itself. We need to raise their salaries. We need to give them good, safe places and good places to work, healthy places to work, where they feel supported. When the legislature is passing legislation like qualified immunity that dilutes that, it's not making them feel good. And so if we're not supporting law enforcement, we can't undermine it and expect public safety to get better.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time. New Mexico Republican State Representative Luis Terrazas, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Hey, see you next year. Thank you, Anthony.
We want to thank you for joining us as well. For your legislators, don't forget you can always stay updated with news anytime at our website, krwg.org. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time.